Thank you very much. And thank you, Nick, for the wonderful things you said. And thank all of you for being here. It's wonderful to be back on the platform again after a vacation. And it's wonderful to know that truth never stops, whether we are here or somewhere else, that the truth of our being is eternal and goes on and on and on. I thought I'd like to just talk to you briefly about what religious science believes about healing. Of course, we have 4 years in which we teach this. And tonight, we're going to start our 4 years. Only I'm going to do it in 45 minutes, all that. But the magnitude of the subject is pretty tremendous. And the magnitude of our own consciousness is equal to it. And so we're infinite beings studying an infinite mind in an infinite process. Now, I believe that there's one power in the universe. Dr. Holmes said there's a power for good in the universe, and you can use it. And I believe that. I call it spirit, or God, or mind. It doesn't make any difference what we call it. But the important thing is to recognize it is. And that this power, which I'm going to call mind, operates through thought. It operates through your thought and my thought. Now, this mind is everywhere present. And that's why we say it's infinite, and it cannot be divided, cannot be separated. It's everywhere present. But it's present in you and me as thought. And what we think into that mind determines what that mind is going to be to us. Spiritual healing is recorded many times in the Old Testament of our Bible. In the New Testament, the life and teachings of Jesus center, we might say, almost exclusively around the healings that he had. The ignorant call them miracles. Those that know recognize that he had an awareness of a principle, and he was using a scientific understanding to bring through his healing. There was nothing miraculous about them. The early church practiced healing, but as time went on in the early church and politics entered into it, and the various isms sprung up within the church, healing seemed to disappear and seemed to be lost. But then, not so very many years ago, it seemed that there was a return of healing. And the reason to be for metaphysics is that when the best profession, the best scientific understanding could not produce healing, there still must be a greater power, something that went beyond medical science, beyond all forms of therapy. And so it was a quest then to find that something. Now we called it spiritual healing. We had down in Maine a watchmaker, Phineas B. Quimby, and he commenced to conduct experiments. And just to be brief on what he discovered, he came to the conclusion that everything is a man's belief, and that you are your belief, and everything in your life and experience represents your belief, and that to change your condition, you must change your belief. Then along came Mrs. Eddy, and Mrs. Eddy was healed by Quimby. And whether Mrs. Eddy taught what Quimby taught or not is irrelevant. The fact is that the healing movement was underway. And we had a man by the name of Evans. We had any number of these early pioneers who were part of this healing consciousness and were working to bring through this healing. And then in Great Britain, we had a very distinguished man there, Judge Thomas Troward. And he arrived at all of these teachings of science of mind, independent of Quimby, independent of Christian Science, and so far as we know, independent of any teacher that was in the field in that day. But he had an exceptional mind, and he was an exceptional person. And so we used his books, part of our curriculum. It was the writings of Judge Trord, largely, that influenced Ernest Holmes and his brother Fenwick Holmes. So that then we had the Holmes brothers, Ernest and Fenwick, and they were traveling all over the United States lecturing on success and creative mind. It was very wonderful what they brought through and the way in which they continued their unfoldment. Many others came out of the other direction, and of course we had Emma Curtis Hopkins, who then became the teacher of teachers, and she turned out as a graduate, Lowell and Myrtle Fillmore, who founded the Unity movement, Nona Brooks of Divine Science, Alfred Greer of Church of Truth. So you see, we have a long heritage, a long background, a tremendous background. Now, I believe in background because my background is that mind which said, let us make this person in our own image and likeness. But that's your background too, because that mind that said, let us make this person in our own image and likeness was that which spoke you into form. I think it's very important that we recognize we never get away from the original idea of who we are and what we are. And we never get away from this idea of God thinking us into form and endowing us with the ability to change our lives and make our lives anything that we want them to be. For we recognize that this infinite mind endowed us with individuality. And that's why I said there's just one mind, but it operates through our thought. And there's just one principle, and it operates through your thought and through my thought. And therefore it's very essential for us to recognize that since it is operating through a principle, that means there's a science to it. And that means there's a way in which it works. And that means that it takes us out of the realm of fantasy, it takes us out of the realm of wishing, it takes us out of the realm of hoping, and brings us into a consciousness of absolute being, where we know what we think is established as our word and is brought forth in our manifestation. The great value that Quimby gave to us, and it was a tremendous impetus that he gave to the movement. He said, you're not sick in your body, you're sick in your belief. He said, you're sick in your belief. It isn't your body that's sick, it's your belief that's sick. And change your body by changing your belief. Now, Jesus had said the same thing. He said, it's done unto you according to your belief. But we perhaps didn't take that too much as a scientific principle, because our religious concept of Jesus is what caused us to misinterpret Jesus. Jesus was the greatest individual that ever lived because he had an understanding of the law, and he knew he was dealing with a principle, and when he spoke, that principle responded to him. And so when there was a man that was paralyzed, and he'd been seeking help, seeking healing, Jesus looked up at him and said, pick up thy bed and walk. And the man got up and walked. Now Quimby, we owe Quimby our interpretation, our understanding of that, because see, Jesus didn't explain. Apparently the people around Jesus weren't very receptive to explanation. They were wonderful on the fish and loaves, you know. And when Jesus had a party, they'd come far and wide. And remember, Jesus' first so-called miracle was when the wine ran out at a wedding ceremony, and Jesus made better wine than they'd been serving. So that everywhere people followed him, not because of what he said, but because of what they could get out of him. Now, that's not a cynical remark, because that can be present today. until we recognize that that life is more than what we get. And that's what I tried to bring out in all of my teaching, that we got to get out of the getting class and get into the being class. Stop trying to see how much you can get out of the teaching. Commence to see how much you can be in your expression. And that's where we bring it forward. So, you see, Quimby said that, all right. Jesus said, lift up your belief. Lift up your belief. Your belief's down in the gutter. I know lots of people that way, don't you? All right. That belief is way down here. All right, lift it up. Lift it up. He didn't condemn them. He didn't say there's anything wrong for you to sleep. In fact, on one occasion, he says, sleep on, sleep on. You remember when his disciples, he asked them to go with him and keep watch while he was having this wonderful experience? And what did they do? They went sound asleep and left Jesus all alone. So then when Jesus finished what he was doing, he looked at them and said, sleep on, I can get along without you. And so they're still sleeping proudly. But you see, we come back, it's a matter of our belief. Now, we have to recognize it's all in our belief. It's what we believe about ourselves. Well, now what do we believe about healing? Well, I believe that there's just one principle, God, infinite good, and the purpose of that principle of good is to express itself fully and completely. Now, God is a conscious, expanding expression when it comes to expression. Disease is a contracting, destructive something. And disease would tend to destroy. Well, the universe is not going to destroy itself. The universe is to expand itself. So there's nothing in the universe that could justify disease. The universe itself is an expansive something. It's constructive and it's building up. Disease tears down. Healing builds. Healing rebuilds. And healing brings us back to the consciousness where we were in the beginning. Well, then there's nothing in the infinite mind that could produce disease. That certainly changes our concept of people that say, well, God sent this disease to me, and therefore I must learn to bear it. God never willed disease on anyone. God never created a disease, and God doesn't manifest disease. God is health, and God is well-being. And so that's one of the first obstacles that we have to clear, that God had anything to do with our sickness. Now, it's a very subtle thing, because people will say, I wouldn't give anything for what I learned while I was sick. And then they appear to think that God made them sick so they would learn a lesson. That's not true at all, not a word of truth in it. So then we clear that hurdle. And then we've got the other concept, but sickness is a form of punishment. I'm being punished for what I did. I'm being punished for what I didn't do. And sickness is not a form of punishment. In fact, there's no punishment in God. God doesn't know how to punish because God sees us only as perfect. And God sees us only from the standpoint of this consciousness of good. And so we say there is no punishment in God, and disease can never be a form of punishment. Well, then we say, all right, well, then maybe it's caused by the devil or evil or malpractice. And some of the earlier metaphysical people then believed that thought could be creative in a good way or thought could act in a bad way. And so the early metaphysicians, not only were they thinking in terms of the healing and being constructive, but then they had to spend an awful lot of time protecting themselves from the evil, because other people were thinking evil about them, and these evil thoughts would manifest. Now let me tell you briefly, the reason that a person's evil cannot touch you is because a person's negative thought is against principle. A person's positive thought is with principle. It's much easier to get well than it is to get sick. Because to get sick, you're breaking basic laws. And you're breaking these basic laws, and therefore you're setting up obstruction. But to get well, you're getting hold of this one great principle of life, and you're letting this healing power, this one force of good, you're letting it take over and letting it manifest in everything that you're doing. So it's very important to recognize there is no power outside of yourself. There is no power outside of yourself. And the power in you is God. And you have the ability to recognize God as the power and to think God into perfect form in everything that you're doing. Well, then we continue our thought in this particular way. Now we've removed those old bugaboos that we had, which caused disease, and we're recognizing there's no cause for disease except what our thought does to ourselves. And so we say, all right, but someone will say, well, he had pneumonia. And he said, I never thought pneumonia. That's perfectly true. You don't have to think a specific disease to get sick. In fact, you don't really have to think disease at all to get sick. All you have to do is to know that you're out of sorts with the world, and the world is against you, and everybody in the world is crooked, and that's all you need to get sick. Now you see, it's a negation, isn't it? All right? Then what we want to do, we want to get away from that and come back into the consciousness of that which is right. Well, suppose people do seem to be against you. All right? And there's no doubt that there are people that try to work against us at times when we're doing particular things. All right? But no one has power over you unless you let them have power over you. Therefore, if someone is trying to do something to delay me or delay you, they do not have that power because you don't give them that power. And you come back to that perfect recognition of who you are and what you are. Is somebody trying to do something against you, plotting against you? Well, maybe they are. I don't say that not. But what I say is, you don't have to let it affect you. And they can plot all they want. It's like little boys playing with matches. Or people daydreaming. They're doing things to themselves. But you take the stand, only good can come to me. And no thought but good can enter my consciousness. Now, people are envious. Envy is a terrible thing. Jealous is an awful thing. Few people are completely free from jealousy and envy. And it's so much easier to be jealous of a person than it is to get to work and demonstrate the thing for yourself. So that's what we're trying to recognize. We take the stand. What you think about me is unimportant to me. What I think about you does not affect you. It affects only me. Therefore, I am the complete law unto my perfect expression. And no one then has the power to frustrate me or produce any negative appearance in my life. Well, then we come back and we're going to get rid of the frustration in our own consciousness. See, it's our belief. It's our belief. If you have a belief in frustration, almost invariably it's focused on something outside ourselves. It's focused on something somewhere else. That's one of the reasons that astrology can be a very dangerous subject. Because in the study of astrology, some people simply interpret the forces that are against them. And then when things are not moving, they say, well, you see, this force is against me. Saturn is in the wrong place, and Uranus is in the wrong place, and that's why I can't succeed. And so we say, all right, we push all those things to one side. You're greater than Saturn, you're greater than Uranus, you're greater than everybody in your environment, and you must come back then to that consciousness of who you are, that you're establishing that in your mind, and that's what you're working on. Now then, that brings us to the place where then we say, all right, if I get angry at somebody, then am I going to be punished by getting sick? No, there's no punishment. Remember that. There's no punishment. There's only an inevitable cause, an inevitable effect of every cause. Judge Troy said to talk about the mystery of pain is like talking about the mystery of a broken window when you've seen a boy throw a brick through it. And that's what we come back to. We're not punished. We're not punished in any way at all. We're not punished by our negative thoughts. We're subject to the consequences of our negative thought, and that's why we can change them. Whatever we do, we can undo. And since we build it up, we can tear it down. And so whatever it is we want, we can bring to a perfect idea. When I first went to New York, this will really date me, I think the biggest building in New York was the Flatiron Building. You remember the Flatiron Building? They've probably torn it down ages ago. Because, nowadays, as soon as a building gets 50 stories, they tear it down and build 160 stories. And you've got to build them bigger and better, because that seems to be the law. But if we hang on to the negation, if we hang on to the limitation, let's put it that way, life is to express in you, through you, and manifest in your world around you according to your God concept. Now, if you don't let that life express, then you have a consequence to follow. You're not going to be punished because you don't do it, but you find that here's a law of consequence. Because if you bottle up this life force, it becomes stagnant. And we know what happens to stagnant water or stagnant anything. And so stagnant consciousness is worse than stagnant water. And so we have to recognize then, all right, we're going to come back now. And we're going to open up the channels of our being. What is it that we're trying to be? What is it we're trying to bring out into our expression? You see, I don't believe that we were born to die. I do not believe that we were born to die, and I'll repeat that again. And years ago, I made that statement. People sort of ridiculed me. I said, I don't care. I know that death is not a part of the divine plan. And somebody's got to start talking about it, break down the idea that people have to die and get ready to die. Why, people have spent half their lives getting ready to die. They forget to live. They're going to live somewhere else. And they get to somewhere else and they're going to get ready for wherever they're going to go next. Because they'll never make up their mind to be it. They're always going to be it. They're going on to something better. And that's why I say, come on back right now. And I can truthfully say that I keep any thought of death out of my consciousness. I keep in the consciousness of life. And I believe in life, and I believe that we should think in terms of life. Now, that is the basic healing principle. Because if you believe that you've got to die, all right. But when I was a kid, I used to, in those days, when a person died, they put in the paper what the person died of. Thank heavens they don't do that anymore. And Mrs. So-and-so died of pneumonia. Oh, God, please never let me get pneumonia. And then I read that Mr. So-and-so had a heart attack. Oh, God, please don't ever let me get a heart attack. And then I read somebody else had typhoid, and they died of that. I said, oh, God, please don't ever let me get typhoid. And then one day somebody said, well, how are you going to die then if you never get any disease? That's a good question. And that was his answer, you see. And so then I recognized, if I'm planning on dying, then I got to do something to die. See? If I can eliminate the idea of death from our consciousness, all of us, then everything is based upon living. And therefore, we have undermined the power that disease had. When you recognize that you are living and that life is forever and you are forever. Now maybe there's one other idea I should put in there. That's the idea of age. Because the idea of age is just as bad as the idea of death or the idea of disease. And people who believe that they have to age. And they say, well, I'm older than I was, and they think in terms of aging. And I find then, along with the idea of age, there comes disease. It's your age. At your age, what can you expect? I know, I've been through it. And when I was in hospital, I'll be 93 in a month. And I was considered a wonder. My doctor was showing me around as a prize specimen. That I was 93. All right? Then I keep that consciousness of being what I am. Now, I don't think of that as age. It's just a milestone that we've passed. But we rule out the idea of age. Don't believe in old age. Somebody wrote a book, Grow Old Gracefully. I don't know who it is, but I hope that, well, I won't say what I think. I don't believe in growing old gracefully. I don't believe in growing old. And we don't have to grow old. And when we recognize the principle of life, then we'll stay where we are. But you see, we have to go deeper than that. You're not your physical body. You're not your physical body. Now, that's what Mrs. Eddy tried to bring out to people, that you're not your physical body. But we say you're not your physical body, but you have a physical body. You have a physical body. You're a spiritual mind, but you have a body. Just as I have on a brown suit, all right? I don't say I don't have on a brown suit. I do have on a brown suit. Then I don't say I have no body. I do have a body. And I can't say there's no pain in my stomach because there's no stomach, because there's no body to have a stomach. You see? Thought is subtle. And you have to know how you're thinking and be clear in your thinking. And so I come back to me, the first chapter of the Gospel according to John. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. That's my challenge, and that's our goal. That the Word became flesh and dwelt among men. So, all right, then see your body. Your body is God in form. And your body being God in form, then your body has to partake of the attributes of God. And you participate in all that God is. So it's a definite part then of your being. And you commence to work in that particular way. Now we go back to our belief that it's done unto us as we believe. We don't have to believe in sickness. We don't have to believe in specific sickness. I think it's very well to take the stand that you know there is no sickness because God is the only power and there's no sickness in God. And therefore, you take the stand that you're the consciousness of God in perfect health and perfect being in perfect life. Now go a step further. If you're not your physical body, because I think of my physical body just as I think of my suit. Now, I like the clothes I buy. You like the clothes you buy, or you wouldn't buy them. And you don't dress to please anybody but you, and that's the one to please. And you know that you're going to get what you like. You may look like the Dickens in it, or you may look like a saint in it, but you'll get what you want to look like. And we have our choice, whether we want to look this way or the other way. I don't differentiate between physical sickness and financial sickness, because the same law that causes a person to be physically sick is the law that causes a person to be financially sick. And if a person is in lack financially, he's sick. He's sick. If a person's body isn't functioning properly, he's sick. But we have a healing principle. And so we go back to the healing principle. Now, in religious science, we teach that you think in terms of the God idea as the God self of you and the only life of you and the only power of you. Therefore, you, perfect God, perfect man, perfect universe, Dr. Holmes said. That the perfect God of you, the perfect you, that's what you're thinking about. Now, the sickness or the disease, whatever you might call it, we say, all right, now we get our mind off of it. As long as we look at it, we're going to perpetuate it. As long as we look at it, we're animating it. We're giving it our thought. As long as we give it our thought, energy follows thought. And so we've got to learn to look away from it and not let our consciousness of it dominated. So we know that it might be an appearance, but it's not a part of me. The sickness is not a part of you. Therefore, while it may be a fact in your experience, it's not a part of the real you and your expression. Now you see, we've taken a great step forward. And right away, we've commenced to dislodge that sickness from us. Because as soon as we justify its non-cause and justify the cause of health, then of course our word commences to act. So it's important that we keep that in our mind and recognize that's the thing that we're seeking to bring out. That always we're seeking to bring out that idea. Now that's where our belief comes in. Well, suppose you believe you're sick. All right? Now we say it's done unto you according to your belief. Yes? You know, Dr. Glasser, who's one of the professors out at UCLA, and he worked a great deal with mental people. And when he took over this particular work, he was told that all of these people were acting strange because they were sick. And so, after he worked a while, he reversed that theory entirely. And he said, these people are sick because of the way they act. And therefore, we cannot excuse their actions because they're sick. Because their actions are making them sick. And therefore, we've got to change their actions and get them back into the consciousness of rightness and establish then a sense of health. And so we say, all right, if we let the negative thoughts dominate us, then we are creating the negative ideas and we're going to express accordingly. You can't sit down and think about fear all day and be calm inside. So what we're doing is we're learning that we create our belief. We create our belief. And say, I'm scared to death. Say, I'm scared to death. All right, now I commence to treat. Now, treatment is a word we use that some people call prayer. We call it treatment because it gives us a scientific aspect, whereas prayer doesn't. All right, now then I'm treating. There's nothing in me of fear. I'm shivering and shaking. There's nothing in me of fear. I'm shivering and shaking. If I say it out loud, you say, why be so foolish? You're scared to death. Why are you making statements like that? Well, you don't have to explain to anybody. And it's best at this stage of the game, don't say it out loud. You have trouble enough convincing yourself. So then you see, we come back, all right? Here's a problem. Sure, I'm scared, all right? I know I'm scared, all right? But I know I can stop being scared. And I'm going to stop being scared by what I call treatment. And I commence then to affirm that God is my perfect life, I'm at peace, and God made my perfect life, I'm at peace, and I live in that consciousness of perfect being. And therefore, since I'm in that consciousness of perfect being, I know that only good can come to me. I know that good comes to me. Therefore, I know there's nothing evil that can come to me. Therefore, there's nothing of fear in me because I'm the consciousness of God at peace with my world. Now, by that time, my fear will be gone because I believe in the power of my word. I believe in the power of my word. When I speak my word manifests. Every time you give a treatment, it's established in your consciousness. Your subjective mind is a great reservoir. And it's a great reservoir that accepts the ideas that you feed into it. And it'll keep them there. It'll keep them there. Now, sometimes they seem to be very dormant. That's because we cover it up, We cover it up with the other ideas. And so when we come back to the realization, but now we're going to bring it to light. We're going to call it out. We're going to let it come forth. And that's when Jesus said, let this happen. Stretch forth thine arm. It was simply telling the subjective to release its constructive idea. They were there, and he simply called it forth, to bring it forth. And that's why I believe the things that are recorded about Jesus. If they didn't happen, I believe they could happen. And I've seen many things as wonderful as many of those things that Jesus did happen in my lifetime, and so have you. And so I believe we come back to that recognition then that we call forth that power and we bring through that power. Now, Jesus in his greatest prayer, and I've used this so many times, he said, bring back to my remembrance the glory I had with thee before the world began. And so that's what we're doing in our treatment. We're getting into the inner consciousness that God is the only power. We're getting into the consciousness where we hear God saying, let us make her or him in our own image and likeness. Now that brings it to my remembrance. I come back to that. We cannot heal without going to the healing principle. And the healing principle is this universal knowingness, this universal mind, from which we emerge and from which we never emerge, because we still live and move and have our being in it. We're still a part of it, and it's all in that consciousness of perfect being. And so I think that's very important, to come back to that idea that we're going to bring back to my remembrance, make me know the perfection that I am. Jesus said, know the truth. All you have to do is know it, and the truth sets you free. And that's what we do with our belief. Through our belief, we go from the false opinion into the knowingness of truth, and accept the knowingness of truth in everything that we do. Well, I don't like to talk about my experiences that much, and I don't like to talk about things that were problems to me. But on the other hand, when I feel that I have met something through principle, I would just like to share that with you so that you'll recognize there's a principle involved. And as most of you know, my gallbladder ruptured. And this happened in the middle of the night. And so I landed in the hospital in the ambulance in the middle of the night. And I was in the hospital for 9 weeks. I had 2 major surgery to remove that gallbladder, which went all over it went all over. Anyhow, and they got rid of that and moved that. And so my doctor told me, very few people ever survive a ruptured gallbladder. And then he went on very cheerily to say, and there are times when I thought you weren't going to survive. And I thought, well, that's very nice, isn't it? It's very nice. The same doctor told me once before, when I was 84, that I lived a long time and I shouldn't worry. I said, what are you talking about? My grandfather lived to be 98, and he had a full head of white bushy hair, and he was fine, and I have no intention of not breaking his record. But you see, there are several ideas here that I think are important. Now, first is the thought of 92. Here's this man, 92, with a ruptured gallbladder. 92, all right? Now, what do we mean by that? We mean that's world thought. And so we say, all right, it's the world thought that says you got to die, you see. It's the world thought that says you can't work beyond 60, you must retire. And that's the world thought. That's the world thought that brings in all of these negative ideas. And so that's the first thing we have to do. We snap our fingers in the face of the world thought. So that instead of the 92 being a handicap, the 92 became a point of attack, a weapon to use. And then people recognize, well, if he's got all this stuff to bring him to 92, well, then he's got enough to pull him through this. So you see, there's a reaction there that we get. Well, then those steps in the world thought we have to dissolve. And then we keep going on and manifesting those. Now, then we come back to the realization, but we are thinking in terms of the constructive power, what we are. I must tell you that there were times when Perhaps I didn't know very much. I guess there were times I didn't know anything. But there were times when I didn't know very much. And yet I was treating myself. But I found that I treated with great difficulty. Now, I believe everybody should have some pet statements, affirmations, that you use in treatment. We all should have a pet affirmation that we can just sort of pull out of the bag, you see, anytime there's a need. And we invoke that treatment, and it works. And so I had a couple of those that I used. And that was the thing that I clung to, because I wasn't functioning at the level where I could outline a treatment and go through all the steps that might be involved. But this is what I did, which I think is so very, very important. I said, now, Father, I have taught in this church for 58 years, and I taught 10 years before I got to this church. And for 58 years, I've been teaching and healing and getting results, you know that, and accomplishing much. Now, every word of truth that I've spoken in lecture, class, or treatment has established itself in my subjective. So that right now, I know that all of those words of truth, those consciousness of truth in my subjective, I now depend on them. And they are my healing power. And those are the things that will pull me through this situation. I don't have to treat step by step each day. I simply know the power within me is already there, it's already established, it's already working, and I'm bringing it out into my expression right here and right now. Of course, it also helps when you have several hundred people working for you too, you know. And the people of this church were wonderful. The practitioners, the members, and everybody was treating. The cards I got and everything like that. Because I think it's a demonstration of all of us. Every time a person manifests healing this sort, it's the demonstration of everybody that's in the environment of that person. And therefore, I think we should take claim for it and take pride in it. That's a part of what we are. But the important thing is that we stick to the principle and we do not let doubt in and we do not let fear in and we live in the consciousness. This is the thing and this is the way it's working and this is what we're bringing through into our manifestation now. Well, would it help if I'd known that it was serious? No, I don't think it would have made any difference. I didn't know I was seriously sick. Didn't make any difference to me. To be in bed was enough. And that was all that I needed to know. And therefore, all I needed to know was I must get out of bed. I didn't belong there. And I must get into the consciousness of perfect being. Because I think it's a great mistake when a person says, oh, I've got a terrible disease. A splinter in your finger is terrible. Just as terrible as any disease that you could have. No disease you have is any worse than a splinter in your finger. All right? Then why don't we think that way? And why don't we believe that way? And why don't we then bring it back and build it up? So that any disease, whether we call it minor or major, whatever it might be, has no power over us because we're the consciousness of wholeness and the consciousness of perfect being. And so we need to come back to that recognition, that wholeness, and that consciousness of perfect being. Now, it's not so much as far as we're concerned, but it is when you're talking about your family or your friends or people around you. It's very important then that you never think of a person as terminal. Never. Never think of a person as terminal. Don't ever think of yourself as terminal. And don't ever think of a person as having an incurable disease. And don't ever think of a person having a disease. See, that's the next step in healing. We're not completely healed in our own consciousness of ourselves as long as we are seeing disease in other people. As long as you're surrounded by sick people, then there's certain sickness in you. Now, when you get into your consciousness, where you know that there are no sick people around you. There may be sick people around you, but you won't know it, and you won't be a part of that sickness, and therefore you don't have to worry about what they're doing. But you keep your consciousness clear that you only let this awareness of good into your being, and you keep yourself in that awareness and know that that is the thing that you're seeking to bring out. It's very important to know this and to keep in this awareness, because Jesus said, "Physician, heal thyself." I think that's the purpose, not only to heal ourselves, but to heal those around us. Now, we don't heal people around us by preaching at them and telling them what to do. We heal people around us by being silent in our observation of them, knowing the truth about their being. And so we don't let the negation about them in our consciousness. But we may see what the problem is. But then in our consciousness, we commence to know that the one presence of perfect being in us, we now know is the presence in this person around us. And therefore, we see these persons around us in this consciousness of wholeness and this consciousness of perfect health. So we're leaving all of the negation out. We're coming back to that consciousness of perfect being and knowing that that is the thing that we believe. Religious science believes that there are no obstacles. Religious science has no criticism of any form of therapy. We're not, unlike Mrs. Eddy, we're not against the medical profession. We don't consider the medical profession a bunch of witches. We consider them scientists doing a very important work. And whatever form of therapy we look at, we say, all right, that's a part of the God idea, part of the God plan. And so whatever we can do that helps us is all a part of the God idea. And we eat, we walk, we exercise, and we do all those things on the outer plane. But remember, it's not the things on the outer plane, it's the consciousness of what you are. Now, while we don't oppose any form of therapy, there's one thing that we would like to add. Dr. Jung said that in all of his experience, he had never known a perfect healing without a change of spiritual understanding on the part of the individual. And that I believe in. And that I believe is the thing that we should insist on. And so we say a person can have any form of therapy he wants, but let's not deceive ourselves. The cause is in mind, and the cause of health is in mind. And know that the cause of health is in mind, and you are that cause, and you live in that consciousness of the cause. And that brings you the perfect healing in whatever you do. We don't believe there are any limitations. The only limitations are in our belief and our power to change our belief and expand our belief. And if something seems to manifest before you that seems to be challenging to your belief, don't be disturbed by it. Do like I said, in treating to eliminate the fear. Just treat to believe what you are. See, one of the great healings that Jesus did, this man came to Jesus and asked for help. And Jesus said, "Do you believe I can do it?" And the man said, "Yes, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief." See, the man knew he believed in a degree, but he did not believe enough to heal himself. And so he asked Jesus to help him establish the belief, because he knew that once he got the belief, the healing would manifest. Go to work and heal yourself. There's no cause for sickness today or ever. Keep in the consciousness of wholeness and perfect being. Thank you.